and welcome to Connect Live. I'm Dawn Peters, and today we're very lucky to have Rachel Virk of Rachel Virk PC. Rachel has been practicing divorce law in Northern Virginia since 1989. She is a certified mediator and a trained collaborative law practitioner. She has received many recognitions and in fact is the author of a book called The 4 Ways of Divorce. Welcome, Rachel.
Hello, Dawn. Nice to be here today.
Thank you. Great to have you here. Obviously, divorce is a big topic and a tough topic, especially if children involved. So let's just jump straight in. And perhaps tell me, what is one of the most stressful concerns with somebody facing divorce?
Absolutely, when there are children, how to tell the children. What to tell them, when to tell them, where to tell them. And what to tell the children can differ if the separation is amicable or if the separation will be difficult.
Right. So if the separation is amicable, what is the best way for the parents to start a conversation with their children?
For couples that get along, Dawn, it's best if they sit down together and tell the children. And it's also important to tell all of the children at the same time. Otherwise, one parent or one child might feel like they're keeping a secret from the other child.
Right.
They may start the conversation with, hey guys, there's something Mom and I or Dad and I want to talk about with you, and then we'll sit down and then start the conversation.
Right. And so after that introduction, what sort of words should be used after that? So I'm sure parents have to be careful with the types of words they use.
It may be something like, you might have noticed that Mom and I or Dad and I have not seemed very happy lately. And we've decided that we'll be happier if we become a 2-home family. That means you'll have a home with Mom and a home with Dad. We'll always be and you'll always have a family, but we'll be a 2-home family. You'll still see lots of both of us, and we'll try to keep your life as much the same as we can. And they may add that our decision to separate is something that we have decided to do after a lot of thought and is in no way because of anything about you.
Right, absolutely. So obviously that's quite a lot. Is there some way to break it down? Can you talk through each part of that?
Well, starting with this idea of, you may have noticed that we haven't seemed very happy lately. They might mention that you might have noticed that Mom and Dad have been arguing a bit and not being as affectionate and holding hands and sitting together and laughing and playing as much as they may have in the past. And they may have noticed that Mom and Dad aren't sleeping in the same bedroom anymore, which is not the way most married couples sleep. So it might start with telling the children that we're just not happy anymore and that we've decided that we're going to be happier if we separate.
Right. Is it always the case that the child's life will actually not change that much?
Well, regarding the phrase, we'll try to keep your life as much the same as possible, it's important that parents not say that unless it's true. But I have found that parents who co-parent try very hard to focus on their children and keep them in much the same activities and schools as they can. And just backing up for a moment, this idea of telling the children we're just not happy together anymore, it's important not to say things like, Mom decided to end the marriage and break up the family, or Dad found someone else that he'd rather be with, because it's really not about telling the children that one or the other parent is at fault.
Right.
Generally, a marriage isn't working because it's not working on both sides, not generally all because of one person. And even if it were largely due to the actions or behaviors of one person, children are programmed and wired to love both parents. And it's actually harming a child to make them feel like they shouldn't still have that love for both parents.
Right. And talking about fault, I'm assuming it's important for the child to be told it's not their fault.
Absolutely. There's no reason, again, to even introduce the concept of fault. Instead, words like, this separation is in no way because of anything about you, is a way to say it. There's no reason to even introduce the concept of blame unless perhaps a parent feels a child might think he or she is to blame for the divorce.
Right. Can you give an example, perhaps, where a child might feel that they're to blame for the separation or divorce?
Well, let's say a child spilled some dark fruit juice on a lightly colored rug. Mom and Dad then had a big fight, and then one of the parents left and didn't come back anymore. Well, that small child may feel that they spilled the juice, they caused a fight, they upset a parent, and it's all their fault that that parent isn't coming back anymore.
Right.
So it's important to make sure the children understand that this is a decision mom and dad made because they are not happy anymore with each other. But they'll never stop loving the children, they'll always love the children, but mom and dad are going to be happier if they become a two-home family.
Right. And I'm assuming that some parents start with saying we're going to get separated, but should the children be told if it's definite and final that they're getting a divorce?
Very young children don't even understand what a divorce is. But after perhaps age 5, it might be appropriate to tell a child something like, we will be getting a divorce, which is a court paper ending our marriage to each other. But we will always be your parents. We will never stop loving you. The parents might add that mom or dad will be moving to a new home in a few weeks, and you'll go to see that home soon. And it is very important for the children to go visit that new place, no matter how humble, and to visit that home with a drive directly from the former marital home to that new residence and not after running a lot of errands, because the children really do need to see just how far away their parents' new home is and that they're not just sort of falling off the face of the earth. And this idea of understanding there will be another home helps the children get to acceptance, because just as the parents go through those stages of denial, bargaining, grief, and anger to get to acceptance that the marriage is ending, the children need to get to that stage also of acceptance.
Right.
And they're not reading self-help books. If they don't understand that this is permanent, this is happening, it leaves them in this sort of limbo of always hoping that mommy or daddy will come back. And that doesn't help them to accept the situation and move on.
Right, absolutely. And you bring up the point of timing there. I mean, you've spoken a lot about how and what, but the when, I'm assuming the children need to know when this finality is happening.
Yes, when to tell the children is an important consideration. Parents should not wait until all of mom's belongings are boxed up in the hallway, and it's too soon to tell the children when there are still no plans for either parent to move out to a new location. And it is so important not to be telling children right before the SAT or right in the middle of finals in 11th grade, not on the first day of summer, and not around a special holiday or birthday, because that child will forever associate that holiday or birthday with when this news was conveyed to them.
Absolutely. And where is the best place to tell them?
Generally in the TV room. It's not a great idea to tell the children in bed, because then in the future the child might have sad thoughts trying to fall asleep. Not in a public place necessarily, because a child might not feel free to fully express himself or herself without embarrassment. Not really in a special place that now will become associated perhaps with a sad memory. So generally in a comfortable place where the family is used to interacting, and that seemingly is usually in the TV room.
Right, no, that's a great idea. So obviously in situations where the separation is very difficult, what should the children be told there?
By when the separation is difficult, I mean situations where perhaps someone is experiencing and dealing with substance abuse and is perhaps in rehab, or perhaps a restraining order was issued because of domestic violence. Perhaps someone had to go off to jail, or perhaps there's a significant other that one of the parents is involved with. Even in these situations, it's important to simply focus on the idea that mom and dad are no longer happy together and will be happier if the family becomes a two-home family. It is not about again, blaming a parent or having a child feel that this terrible, horrible thing happened. It's not about blame, it's about moving forward.
Right. And you touched on domestic violence. What if the separation is due to physical abuse?
If there is physical abuse and a parent was taken away for hitting or harming the other parent, perhaps even by the police, that is a consequence of a parent doing something he or she should not have done that is wrong. No, mommy didn't put daddy in jail. Daddy put himself in jail for breaking the law and committing a criminal assault and battery. Children should understand that violence should never be accepted, and it's never appropriate, and there are consequences to domestic violence. And if a child grows up seeing and accepting the fact that one parent, could be mother or father, is abusing the other parent, they sort of normalize that. And it would be a very sad thing to think that in the future they may feel that it's acceptable for them to be in a relationship like that as well.
Right.
Additionally, if there's substance abuse, it's important for a parent to be honest and say, Mom or Dad has a problem with drinking or drugs and is at a place right now where he or she is working on addressing that and getting better. And that the reason that they have a problem with alcohol or drugs is because there's some unhappiness in his or her life that he or she has to work through, and they are addressing that right now. And if a parent, unfortunately, has an issue with addiction and is not addressing it, it may be important to tell the child that we need to separate to keep you safe. If a child understands that a parent has an issue with drugs or alcohol, it's important for the parent to tell that child, it's okay to love your mom or dad who has this problem, but not to accept or love the behavior.
Right.
And that it's appropriate to deal with and address this behavior, and sometimes a parent has to go somewhere to work on that.
Absolutely. And if you can speak to then, in the scenario where one of the parents is having an affair, what should be said then?
When there's a significant other, again, it's important to be honest with a child, but they only need a G-rated version of events. Sometimes what a parent might do is try to alienate a child from the parent who's unfaithful. And that's a sad thing to see, because ultimately that will hurt the child. And almost always what I have seen over these years is when the child ultimately realizes that one of the parents exaggerated the fault of the unfaithful parent and made it seem like the whole entire marriage is because that parent was unfaithful, they may realize that it was not appropriate for that parent to drive them away from the unfaithful parent. And often then they will then be even more angry at the parent who tried to drive them away from the unfaithful parent, and it just creates so much dysfunction and sadness.
Right.
It's a very heartwarming thing that I see, especially in my mediations, where I have seen women say, I know he's having an affair, I know he's going to marry that woman, I know that she'll be brushing my children's hair in the morning, but I have to accept that my husband is moving on, and it's not going to help my child to feel that they can't accept that person into their life. And similarly, a man may say, well, I understand that she's involved with someone else, but she's still the mother of my children, and I want her to stay home still and care for the young children, and I'm still going to pay her alimony. And in the future, if the lady remarries and the man understands that her new husband will be playing catch with his son and coming to the games and whatnot, I see, especially in the mediation, such tenderness and acceptance of the situation. And the children really do get their cue from the parents. If they're told that this is mom's new friend or boyfriend, or this is dad's new friend or girlfriend, if there is going to be a remarriage, it's an easier transition for the child to accept that person into their life, and they have to accept them into their life if there's going to be a remarriage. And when there's so much animosity and anger that we see in the litigation cases, what we see all the time is the dysfunction and pain that the children experience and then act out. And let me just expand on that. In these 27 years that I've been doing family law, I've had many cases that seem to go on 5, 6 years until a child is 18. And for people that really are dysfunctional and are really punishing the other parent, it hurts the children. And these are the children that we see get involved with drugs, alcohol, having sex when they're very young, running away from home, dropping out of school, getting involved with the criminal justice system. It is an absolute predictor that the children who do not do well when there's a divorce do not do well because their parents are fighting and have so much high conflict. But the parents who can put their personal feelings aside, accept the situation, move on, those children thrive they do well. Yes, they may do well with a new stepfather, stepmother in the picture, and that is a hard thing to accept, especially when there's been a long marriage. But the best gift that parents can give their children is not to fight with each other. And if parents are accepting of these difficulties with significant others, it goes a long way towards helping their children to be happy and healthy in the future. And just going back about the substance abuse or mental health issues, because often people will self-medicate a mental health issue. And if there is a mental health issue, if someone is experiencing or suffering from increasingly difficult symptoms of something like bipolar disorder, that's a chemical imbalance in the brain that has to be managed with medication. And there is a slight genetic component to that. So if someone is modeling appropriate behavior for their children of how to correctly deal with a mental health or a substance abuse issue, they are teaching their children that there are some difficulties that you have to work through and address, and that there's an appropriate way to address them.
Absolutely. It's obviously a big responsibility of parents going through separation divorce when they have children. So in your years of practicing law, have you seen a parent simply walk away from a child?
It is unusual, but sadly, yes. And in those very, very difficult situations, the most important consideration is keeping the self-esteem of the child intact, because he or she might feel that they're not worthy of being loved. And again, it's important to be honest with the child and to say, Mom or Dad has left because he or she is thinking more about himself or herself right now than about the family. It's nothing about you. It's very sad because Mom or Dad is now going to miss out on all the wonderful experiences he or she could have with wonderful, beautiful you. And it's important to tell that child, I'll be here for you. We'll get through this together. You can talk about your mom or dad, and if you miss them, you can tell me how you miss them. But understand that he or she is making decisions right now that are unfortunate, and he or she just can't show that love for you that you deserve. But we'll get through this, and I will always be here for you.
Right, absolutely. So in circumstances where the separation becomes difficult, when should the child or children be told?
When there's a difficulty, sometimes a parent goes off to jail or has to go to rehab or moves out very angrily. So in those difficult situations, it's important to tell the child shortly after a parent departs, or certainly when a parent has to leave with a child, they're telling the child why.
Right. So in that conversation, what do you think is the most important consideration?
Always honesty. When a child's world is changing so much and they have no control over what's happening, it's important for that child to at least feel like they're getting some trustworthy information and that they can trust the parent who is there with them, telling them what's going on, to tell them what the truth is. For instance, if mom or dad is going to rehab for 90 days, it's not necessarily the best thing to say, oh, mom or dad is on a business trip, when it turns into a 3-month stay. Instead, again, it's more appropriate to say, mom or dad has some issues with drugs or alcohol that he or she is working on and is working to get better.
Right, absolutely. So in closing, because obviously it's a huge topic, but what are some of your final thoughts when involving children in separation or divorce?
Litigation is an old-fashioned way to resolve a family dispute. It causes so much heartache, cost financially, emotionally, and in every other way. If parents can sit down with their ex-to-be and work out how to create a new 2-home family, it is a much better gift for their children than going to court. Now, granted, sometimes we have to go to court to protect financial security or to protect the children, but when it's possible to sit down and work it out, that is a much better process and has less of a negative impact on the children. Life is full of difficulty, and how the parents go through this difficulty models that behavior for the children of how to deal with adversity and difficulty. And if they're modeling for their children that they will go through this process with strength and dignity and respect, that is a much better process than to teach the children about getting even and making someone pay and causing that much more pain and heartache and difficulty. Parents brought the children into the world, and there's a responsibility to teach them how to cope with the difficulties that life brings, the unfairness that life can bring, and how separating and divorcing parents conduct themselves during this process, and how they tell the children about the divorce is a very, very important component.
Absolutely. Wow, you're so informative. So if people wanted to find out more about having a divorce, getting separated, and involving children in it, how can they get hold of you and find out more about this?
I'm very easy to find. My website is virk-law.com, and on that website there are articles about how to tell the children. There's a brief video script of what to tell the children, and also a brief written script about what to tell the children, whether the separation is difficult or amicable. My website also has a link to my book, and about half of the book is right there. You can click on various chapters right from my website, and there is a chapter on children. I think it's called What About the Children? So the website is not overwhelming with an overwhelming amount of information. There's little tidbits here and there that people can look at and find for what's appropriate.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Wonderful information for parents having to go through such a difficult time on their own, let alone involving children. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dawn. I appreciated being here. And this is a topic that I feel very strongly about. And that's why on my website right now I seem to have a number of articles and video on this topic. Because I'll just stop for a moment and say, 27 years of litigation experience, meeting hundreds of people each year, thousands of people, sometimes families that I work with for years if they're in litigation and I see the difficulties, or that I work through their situation amicably, but then we readjust support a few years later, or we readjust a visitation or shared custodial arrangement years later. I see how the children turn out. And it's heartbreaking to see parents do things that are so destructive and hurtful. It is amazing to see parents act with tenderness in the divorce process, and I do have the good fortune, which most litigators don't have, of actually seeing in my mediation practice people acting with tenderness and concern for each other and for the children. And if I might also take a moment, along with this idea of litigation, fighting it out in court, mediation, sitting down with a neutral mediator, there's something called collaborative divorce, which is two attorneys sitting down with their clients strictly to settle the case, without pretending they're going to go to court, without making a lot of threats, trying to grab all the marbles. It's a respectful process where the parties all sit down and say, let's figure out how to work this out, how to create this new two-home family. It's done in a very respectful way. So the collaborative process of divorce is also a wonderful thing to see, and there's information on my website about that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing such detailed and informative information for people going through this difficult time. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching Connect Live Show. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please go to connectionhub.biz.